everybody for coming on and listening. Just kind of give you an idea of where this came from. I started off as a sports doc, and as I started working with more and more athletes, started identifying more and more problems on the injury end of things, and so I really started looking at biomechanics and where a lot of those problems were coming from. And then as I became a coach as well, then I started being able to identify uh, those problems from the other end. And so what I found is that technique and all these things are extremely important. Let's see if I can get to my technique is extremely important, and so that's why I get into more of the specifics of it, because if we really focus more on the technique and the specifics of actual movement and function, a lot of times we can overall enhance performance, but we're also going to head off a lot of injuries in the long run. So let me get into this. So just so that we're all on the same page, there's a lot of times, especially with younger coaches, I hear them using speed and agility in the same as the same term. They think it's the same thing. Just so that we're all on the same page is really not. So speed is just the ability to be able to cover a distance in a short amount of time, and it's broken up into three components. So you've got your acceleration, and you think about it from either somebody from a standing position where they're having to run to make a quick sprint, or coming out of the blocks. If they're running track. But you have to have a quick acceleration, reach and maintain a maximum velocity for a certain amount of time, and then an effective deceleration. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of the problems that we see, especially from the injury side of things, come out of that deceleration. But a lot of these components we're going to get into, if you start working on these things, you're going to see improvement. And it's a lot of little tweaking that you're going to do especially if you've already got a high level athlete to work with. So. And then agility is just the ability to be able to change direction. And you want them to be able to do it efficiently and quickly, but there's a lot of components to it. There's a lot of neurological components to it. I spent a couple of years working in a facility where we worked with retired pro athletes. We had current pro athletes, retired veterans, and we did a lot of neurological training, neurological rehab with these people. And when it comes to agility, there's a real big neurological component, and it comes down to balance, coordination, being able to have reflexes, be able to react and adapt quickly, and then all the components that go with it. So you get changing direction, cutting, pivoting, all these things that you have to be able to do. And then depends on effective change of body position and then body control. So agility, really the core of it is being able to control your body to be able to change that direction and do that effectively. So some of the most common technique problems that we see with agility, you have incorrect body positioning. So they're either going to be leaning too far forward, they're going to be leaning back too far. Especially you see some of these distance runners over time, you'll actually start seeing those that body position start sinking back, and they sink into their hips instead of being able to keep a good upright lock position while they're running. So it's going to affect their balance and ability to be able to generate power. And then it's essential for maximum speed and agility. So there's that fine line that you want them to be able to get that body position in, that's going to be able to provide for them that maximum. It's individual for each athlete. So, and then poor arm action. So from a neurological standpoint, we get into what was called cross crawl patterns. As one arm swings forward, the opposite leg should be able to move forward at the same time. And a simple test that you could actually do with somebody is just have them do a slow march where they have to bring the arm up in the opposite leg. If they have a hard time doing that, they've got a little bit of a problem that you need to work through, because that's going to affect their performance overall. And so it's going to affect poor arm action, where they're going to have excessive arm swing. The timing between their arm swing and their feet and leg movement is off. And so you want to make sure that timing is down. Also, little things, especially when we're sprinting, fractions of a second matter. And so certain little things, you want everything directed in the same direction. So if they're creating forces that are coming across the body, abnormal movements that's going to affect that midline, then it's going to slow down little increments. And then over time, it slows them down over the entire distance. So you want to have everything going in the straight line. Foot placement is extremely important as well. Improper foot strike patterns. Depending on the type of runner they are, there's a lot of debate out there, especially in the running community, on whether it's okay to heel strike if somebody's a mid foot striker, if they're a ball runner, and so depending on the type of running they need to be able to do, midfoot to forefoot is most ideal. And the way I explained it to people is that if you have somebody that's a consistent heel striker, the whole purpose of heel striking is a braking mechanism. And so if we're trying to generate momentum forward by heel striking and overextending or not extending far enough, the stride is too short, the width of their feet as far as if it's too wide or narrow on their base, and then that's going to affect their stability and their ability to be able to change direction if they need to do that. And then inefficient deceleration and braking. So it's vital for quick changes. You got to be able to decelerate enough to where you can change direction effectively and be able to stop when necessary. Or if you have to be able to do a quick stop. We used to do what was called, we used to call it the TCU drill, where somebody would be able to sprint straight forward, and then we would have them throw their feet and quick change direction. They would almost bounce out of that into another direction. And so, and that's efficient if you have like soccer players, football players, basketball players, anything that requires a lot of stopping. But distance wise, we want a good braking distance. And so longer stopping distances or increased risk of injury can be a problem. Excessive braking with hard stops, we all know that there's certain sports that are just harder on the knees than others, and so we want to make sure that we're working on those braking mechanisms so we can alleviate some of that pressure off the knees to prevent knee injuries. And then failing to utilize proper deceleration mechanics, so lowering their center of gravity, using eccentric muscle contraction, using core strength to be able to help with that process. And then lack of body control and coordination. You get a lot of wasted energy, and then you end up with reduced speed and agility over time, over an accumulation of movement. So coordinating between the upper and lower body, and then it leads to inefficient movement patterns. So we talked a little bit about that already with upper body, lower body mechanics, timing, and then that cross crawl pattern, making sure that because the faster that you can get both of them going, if they're out of sync, it's going to actually slow them down. If they're both in sync, then they're going to be able to gain speed. And then this is a common problem that I see, especially with my years of coaching as well. And it's difficult at times, and there's a balance that has to be created. And it's about timing, because I know with coaches, your schedules, you got a lot of athletes you've got to get through, and there's a lot of times you have people just lined up and you're just running them through. And what I try to do is I try to get coaches to schedule a time where when you're working on technique and breaking all these little things down, this is early on in your phase training, to be able to start working on these things. That way, by the time you actually get to your actual sport training, a lot of these mechanics have already been worked on, and then you can actually start implementing them and make them practical for your specific sport. And a lot of times technique just kind of go to the wayside. Just for an example, I had a basketball team that they asked me to come in, do an evaluation on their girls basketball team. They had 3 ACL tears in the same season, all of them starters, ended up making them go last in district, had a horrible season. They asked me to come in and take a look at some of the things that they were doing. And I looked at their warm-up drills and routine. I looked at the workout program that they were doing and all those things. And one of the things that we found is that technique was just they had really good basketball technique, but actual movement skills and agility skills their technique was horrible, and they were doing a lot of things that were exposing themselves and putting themselves at risk for injury. And so when I sat down and we started working on those things with that team, all of a sudden things got a whole lot better, and then they ended up winning district the next year. So we really want to focus on mastering those fundamental movement patterns, and before you start increasing the intensity. We talk about progressions, regressions. You got to figure out where your athlete is and specifically what techniques that they need to be working on, so that before you start increasing the speed, increasing complexity of movements, make sure that those techniques are down first before you start adding on and making it more intense. So getting into how you correct some of these things, these are just some basic techniques that we use when I start working with athletes on this. So body positioning, something as simple as wall drills. You just have them put their hands up against the wall, get them into the correct body position. So you get them to understand. We're trying to create muscle memory of what that body position should be for them. Get them in that position, and then have them basically run a sprint pattern against the wall so that they're used to that mechanics. And again, these are just basic fundamental things that you start with, and then the goal is to build up on this. Also, you're going to break all these little things down, and then eventually you start putting them together. So we're breaking down the individual pieces of this as part of the drills, and then you can start building and combining them together over time. The other thing too is mirror running. I'm really big on athletes being able to see what it is that they're doing. And I really encourage coaches to be able to film their athletes when they're running drills so that you can go back and be able to show the athlete what it is that they're doing wrong. It also allows you time to be able to go back, because a lot of times when you're having to run through these drills, it's real hard to see and pick out those little subtle things that may be making a difference. And then you can go back and review it as well. So with mirror running, they basically run in front of a mirror or some sort of reflective surface so that they can see their body position. And then you can make coaching corrections, and then they can work on those things. Again, we're not trying to run hard. We're trying to work on technique with these things. So you want to focus on maintaining an upright posture, slight lean forward while running. And obviously, if you're having to break pieces down, so for example, a sprinter coming out of the blocks, they've got different phases of their body position. So you want to be able to break those things down into the different phases, and then put it together for that athlete. So you can do it as part of your warm-up drills. You can also part of your cool down routines, but you're constantly reinforcing that proper body position to where it becomes muscle memory. Okay. So arm action. So we have arm swing. Athletes perform a variety of running and agility drills. So arm swing drills, you can have them standing in place. Okay. Includes driving the arms back in coordination with the legs, keeping them relaxed. You can even have them slow down. If you notice somebody's having a timing issue, have them slow down to where they're doing just a simple march where one arm comes up, the other leg comes up, and you work on timing those at the same, in coordination. Slow it down, and then gradually start speeding that process up. I've even seen some drills where they just have somebody working on arm speed, and then they work on making sure that they're not over extending on their arm swing, they're not crossing their body, and just breaking down those individual techniques. And you can do it for each individual athlete, or you can do it general across the board for all your athletes. Another thing is resistance band arm swing. So you're going to attach a resistance band around their waist, have them perform. It's similar to like a towel drill. Where people will wrap a towel or something like that around them, and then have them work on running and changing directions. But you can do this as well to be able to focus on arm swing with resistance, so that you can, because you can't do this with a wall, like a wall drill. So this gives you an opportunity to be able to apply some resistance and be able to really focus on driving those arms in that arm swing. Okay. Foot placement. So, you have simple things like sorry guys. So you have simple things like line hops, and ladder drills. I mean, these are common drills that every coaching program, athletic program has, but really focusing on foot placement, making sure that they're landing softly on the ball of their feet, and then we're working on that timing, and then creating that muscle memory of where that foot is supposed to be placed, and being able to have body control. This goes into that body control as well. So having these line hop drills, have them, you could even put specific dots on either side of the line, where you can have them they have to land on those specific dots so that they learn body control a little better. Ladder drills, you have your 2 foot in and out. Most people know those lateral hops, your single leg hops. The other drill there, that's the same thing as a cowboy. Some people call it cowboy in and out. There's a lot of different names for that one. But again, working on quick and precise foot placement. There's a lot of times I see people running these drills, and they're either just stepping on the ladder, and they're not really paying attention to where they're putting their feet. They're just worried on trying to get through it as fast as they can, and they're not being very specific. Slow it down, make them get specific about foot placement, and then start working on speed to go through this, so that you get that proper timing and placement, and you're building that proprioception sensory in that athlete. So deceleration and braking drill. So cone deceleration drill. So what you're going to do is you're going to just line up a set of cones. You can start off with the first set of cones are 10 yards apart, and then you have a 5 yard, and then another 10. So what you can do is have them sprint to the first cone, and then work on decelerating through that 10 yards. And then have them accelerate, have them come to a complete stop, work on accelerating through that 5 yards, reach max speed through that 10 yards, and then decelerate again. And just have them do that drill. You can do about 3 or 4 sets of that for about 4 to 6 sprints. But the point is making sure that they come to a complete stop before they get to the next cone, and that they're using those proper deceleration mechanics. They're lowering that center of gravity. They're working on that braking mechanism of proper foot placement, as well as using their arms to help with decelerating as well. And then you have your T drills. There's so many variations of this. There's a T drill, N drill. I've seen Z drills. There's a lot of different variations with this, but it still goes back to what are you doing with it, and what are you emphasizing with it. So you're having them sprint forward, and then work on that quick deceleration, dropping those feet down, changing direction at the top of the T. And then this drill is going to help enhance your deceleration and change of movement abilities as well. So whether you're having them slow down and circle, and then sprint, and then turn around, circle, and then sprint back, or you can incorporate shuffle drills. There's a lot of things that you're going to be able to see out of that that can biomechanically be a problem. And I've got some examples that I'm going to pull up and show you here in just a minute. So we have this young lady here. She's running a T drill. Now, a couple things that I will say on this one. She's actually a really good athlete. She ended up going to a D1 school. Her deceleration, we were looking for something else. What I'm looking for on this one is seeing how much they overextend on that shuffle, making sure that they're keeping balance, keeping their feet up underneath them. She's staying fairly square. I don't like the fact that she pops up going backwards. She should actually keep her proper body position going back on this one. Also with this one, I'd like to see her really chop those feet down to break. A variation of this, you could have them rounding the cones. But overall, the thing that I like to take away from this is that she does keep good body position. She keeps well balanced, and she's a good athlete overall. So. So here you have your lateral cone drills for body control and coordination. So you can do these in a zigzag pattern, diamond pattern. But basically what you're trying to do is create lateral movements, weaving in and out of the cones, but working on sinking those hips, using their body and their core, start learning to use their core. And I'll go over a little bit stuff on core when we get to part two, and some different things that you can emphasize on that. But start really learning to use their core to help with changing direction, as well as the individual muscle groups that pertain to the legs, and using the arms to help change direction. And then your agility ladder drills, again, these are also going to help with your shuffle drills, lateral quick feet, being able to make sure that they're not overextending and reaching out with their legs to and allowing those knees to collapse. You want to try to keep those knees squared out, keep them up under the shoulders, and now allow them to overextend, because what that does do is that exposes people to knee injuries overall. Okay, so talking about body control, for this young lady here, the thing I want you to notice is this little subtle movement that she does just before she changes direction. Now she's doing this, fairly upright. I would like to see her in a more of an athletic position, but watch what she does right on the end, right here. That little bob right there, that's a sign of core weakness. And we don't have very good body control if you see those little bobs like that when they get to the other end. So that's something that we would have to work on with her. I also want to work on body position, having her upper body in a better position, and using her arms better for that lateral movement. Now, this young lady, the one thing I want you to look at for her is I want you to watch her foot position. She seemed to be kind of out of control, and right here, that leg collapses as soon as she plants. And this young lady is severely at risk of blowing an ACL out on a non-contact injury. But she's also out of control. She could also potentially hurt somebody else because she doesn't have a lot of control. She doesn't break down very well. And if you notice, her arm movement is way out of sync from what her leg movement is. A lot of times she's just letting those arms hang when she's decelerating, instead of using her arms to be able to decelerate. Now, this young lady, I do pick on her. She is actually a Golden Glove boxer, but she does agility drills just so that she can work on body control, and then she does a lot of speed development. I'd like to loosen her arms up just a little bit. She has a little bit excessive forward swing and not enough backward swing, but she does maintain good body control, and she doesn't overextend when she plants and redirects. All right, so that brings me to the end of my material for this first segment. Saxon, do we want to turn it over to questions?
Yes. So I don't see any in the chat, but one question I did have come through on private message is, what is the biggest issue you see with youth athletes when they're trying to develop their speed and agility?
Trying to understand, the biggest thing is trying to understand, trying to understand what it is that you're trying to correct. And that's why the visual is so important, and being able to pick out those subtle movements. It's real difficult to get them to process, especially the younger the athlete. Older athletes they'll tend to process it a little bit better, but the problem is getting them to visualize what it is that you want them to correct. So if you can get them to understand that through those visuals, either record them or have them do it in front of a mirror so that you can point those things out, and a lot of times it's going to click for them a lot better. The other thing is developing that coordination. Sometimes that coordination issue between upper and lower body could have been a developmental issue. It's something that can be corrected, but it takes a little bit of work, and it takes a little bit of practice on working on that. You have to really slow them down. The other thing too is having the patience with it, because I know as a coach as well. I've coached football, and I've been a strength and conditioning coach, and I've coached sprinters and track as well, and throwers. And it's hard when you've got a lot of athletes that you've got to be able to work through, being able to slow yourself down and be more patient with the process as well, knowing that you're going to build the athlete up to be a better athlete. Um, so you've got to kind of slow yourself down as well and be patient with the process.
Awesome. And Steve asked, I do have a female athlete that has a lot of backward lean when she runs slash sprints for track. We've
Okay.
mentioned this and shown it to her, but what is a good way to correct that?
I would say the start off with the wall drills. Just work on body positioning. Start having her do slower movements in that correct body position and have her correct. My question would be: is that does she start off that way, or does it progress that way? I would need to know kind of which one, because the mechanics are a little different between whether they're a distance versus they're a quick sprint. But um, the idea would be that uh, try to maybe start off with some wall drills, have her slow down and work on body position, start working some individual shorter distance drills, and then and there's a tendency also to have a lack of core strength. Doing a lot of core exercises. What I found is that when people do core work, and it's kind of getting ahead a little bit because I was going to cover some of this, but I'll touch on this now. A weak core, they have to understand what 360 core engagement is. And a lot of times, if they have a weak core, there's that tendency to lean back, and then they start using that posterior chain more than they should. So we've got to do is get her to engage her core more. And a lot of times, if you get them to focus on that and start engaging her core more when she's running, then she'll bring that back forward. That's a compensation when they lean back like that to core weakness.
Awesome. And then what is a good age to start implementing speed and agility drills?
That's been a debate, and I've actually, I would say, the younger the better. Um, you've got a lot of these coaches, and I fully appreciate parents that want to take the time and get out and work with kids, and try to coach them. This is one of the biggest arguments that I've had with a lot of them when I've tried to meet with them, is that they're so focused on trying to put together schemes rather than focus on individual technique, and that's really when they need to start working on it and developing it. And it's a slow process. But the problem is that consciously they won't start processing what you're trying to tell them until they hit about middle school. So I would say, if you had an ideal time that you really want to have the focus of the athlete and um, be able to have some effectiveness, I would say just before they start middle school, start working on those things. But you really want to have them doing some sort of agility type work so they understand what the process is and what those drills are. And then you can start focusing on those specifics. When they hit, they're just kind of getting into puberty and that body development starts, and those hormones start kicking in just before middle school would be a really good time to start focusing and breaking those things down.
Awesome. Well, I think that is the last question we had. I did drop in the link to register for part 2. It will take place on October 10th, Tuesday, October 10th at 12 p.m. Central, 1 p.m. Eastern, so same time on October 10th. So feel free to register, and if you need to reach out to Dr. Davis McAllister, his info is on the screen. But I hope everyone has a great rest of their day, and we'll hopefully see you on part 2 in a few weeks.